Did you know that Kristoff from Frozen was actually a reused character design from another Disney film? In the early stages of Tangled, Flynn Rider would have been completely different than what we see in the film. So much so that he would actually be a character called Bastien, who was a farmer and also had a broad shoulder type, gentle giant kind of personality with blonde hair. He was actually going to be an orphan in the film that would later on become a thief, very similar to how we see Flynn Rider in the film. But the big change came when Zachary Levi was casted to play the role. The director actually shifted gears and wanted to make the character more attractive. So he had a meeting with all the female employees, and in this meeting they showed a bunch of photos and videos of some of the most famous leading men in cinema history, such as Johnny Depp, Hugh Jackman, David Beckham, Brad Pitt, and even Gene Kelly. All the women in this meeting gave their feedback as to what features they found most attractive, whether it was eye color, hair color and style, and even body type. And with this information, the director compiled it into the character we know as Flynn Rider. Did you know in Cinderella, if you look closely at the bubbles when Cinderella is scrubbing the floor, you can actually see a hidden Mickey in the shape of the bubbles. This was a very cool Easter egg that the animators wanted to incorporate. Did you know in Ralph Breaks the Internet, during the scene where Penelope goes into the Oh My Disney area, when she meets Stan Lee in the cameo form, which is absolutely cool, if you look closely in the back, you'll notice that there's another Marvel character. It's actually Rocket from Guardians of the Galaxy talking to Zootopia's Judy Hopps. How cool is that? Did you know in the movie Hercules, if you look closely at the rug, you'll see a familiar face? Yep, it's none other than Scar from The Lion King. How cool is that? You know, in a certain way, all the Disney movies are connected, and this just goes to show you. Did you know that in Sleeping Beauty, when Prince Philip stabs the Maleficent dragon, it lets out a scream that's actually from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? It's actually the same recording of the evil hag from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs when she falls to her death. Did you know in Disney's Cruella, when Estella is pretending to be a maid in a hotel, there's actually a movie by the title of Lifeboat playing in the background starring Tallulah Bankhead, who was actually an inspiration for Cruella de Vil. Did you know in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, when the dwarfs approach the cottage, they say in unison, Jiminy Crickets. This was a very cool Easter egg because if you think about it, the film that proceeded after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was actually Pinocchio. So this is technically the first Disney Easter egg in a Disney movie. Did you know in Disney's Pinocchio, when Jiminy Cricket is singing in the opening scene When You Wish Upon a Star, there's two books in the background with very familiar titles. Yep, the one book is Alice in Wonderland and the other one is Peter Pan. This is a very cool Easter egg because those movies weren't even developed yet. Did you know that Mother Gothel tried to kill Flynn Rider more than once? Yep, there was a deleted scene that showed that Mother Gothel tried to stab Flynn in the forest. There's actually a storyboard that never came to fruition, but it has it where they both meet in the forest, very suspiciously. He doesn't even know that it's Mother Gothel, but suspiciously enough, she has the dagger behind her back. Almost in the same style as the huntsman from Snow White, but unfortunately it doesn't go according to plan. Did you know in the movie Tangled, when Rapunzel and Flynn are in the library, if you take a closer look, you'll notice some familiar Disney titles. Yep, by the window, there's the classic Sleeping Beauty book from the original movie, and there's even on the ground the Beauty and the Beast book, and if you look on the side table, there's even The Little Mermaid. How cool. This is a nice Easter egg showing how, again, all Disney movies are connected in their own way. Did you know in Disney's Sleeping Beauty, when the three good fairies are planning on how to keep Aurora safe, if you look closely at Merryweather's cookie, it's actually in the shape of a Mickey Mouse, which is a very cool Easter egg if you think about it. Did you know in Disney's Hercules there's a nod to a classic Disney attraction? Yep, if you look at the muses during the song I Won't Say I'm in Love, they bear a strong resemblance to the singing busts in the Haunted Mansion. Did you know in Into the Spider-Verse, when Miles and Spider-Man are trying to get away from the bad guys, notice that Miles throws a bagel at the one guy and it says over his head the word bagel. This was actually a joke that the animators were teasing with, but one of them took it very seriously and just added it in. Did you know in The Little Mermaid, when Ursula is stealing Ariel's voice, notice that the green hands she's using are different than her own? They're actually the hands of the evil queen from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, specifically the scene where she transforms into a hag. Creepy, right? Did you know this really gross detail in Magic Kingdom? If you actually have been to Liberty Square, you'll notice that there happens to be not a bathroom in sight. It's actually the only land that doesn't have one. Not just that. Notice how the road often has that brown winding line or whatever. It's kind of weird if you think about it and it just makes me wonder, did the Imagineers make a mistake or whatever? But it was actually planned on purpose. The brown line in the road is actually supposed to be a river of poop. The reason why is because due to colonial times, and to try to be historically accurate, during colonial times they would actually throw their sewage in the middle of the street.
Ew, gross. So Disney really didn't want to miss any detail whatsoever, which is kind of gross if you think about it, but it just goes to show you the attention to detail on Disney's part. Yeah, it's just gross.
Did you notice these similarities between Hunchback of Notre Dame and Tangled? Both show the main characters are locked up in a tower, told by their so-called parent that they can't go down because the world is a cruel place. Both show two rebellious love interests, and also, not to mention, there's even an underground passage for outlaws, and both take place during a festival time. Both of the villains have the exact same dagger, and both end up falling to their death the same way. Did you notice this small detail in Disney's Pinocchio? When Lampwick drinks the entire beer, notice how that he immediately turns into a donkey, unlike Pinocchio who only drank half and turned halfway into a donkey. This makes you wonder if there was a potion or something in the beer. Did you know in Disney's Ralph Breaks the Internet, if you look in the background, there's 2 Easter eggs to The Little Mermaid. In the background, you can see the Thingamabob box and also the candlestick from Part of Your World.
Did you know this really sad detail in Spider-Man No Way Home that's definitely going to bring it down? During the scene where Peter is at Aunt May's grave, you'll notice that there's absolutely no reference of her being his aunt. Because of the whole memory swipe thing, Peter wouldn't have been involved in her funeral whatsoever. So therefore, he didn't even have a say-so of what to say on her gravestone whatsoever. It's a really sad detail and just goes to show you that literally, Doctor Strange literally ruined everything.
Did you know in Disney's Enchanted, when Prince Edward gets run over by cyclists, this was actually not part of the script? And he even did the stunt himself? Yep, the actor thought it would have been more believable if this happened, because in the script originally, he was just going to be bumped into by the cyclists. Did you know in Disney's Frozen, when Anna and Elsa are kids playing in the snow, notice that when they're building a snowman, there's a couple of snow figures that look oddly familiar. Yep, one of the snow figures is none other than Dumbo and Baymax.
Did you know, in Monsters University, during the scene when Dawn hands Mike the card, notice how the address says 1200 Dark Avenue. It's actually a play on words of 1200 Park Avenue, which is actually the address for the Walt Disney Studios.
Did you know in Disney's Sleeping Beauty that Princess Aurora would be the first ever Disney princess to have both parents alive? I know, crazy, right? This would actually remain until 40 years later when Mulan would be the second Disney princess to have both parents alive. So if you think about it, Sleeping Beauty actually started the trend. Did you know that Frozone was actually supposed to die in The Incredibles? There's a crazy theory out there that suggests that the first Omni-Droid we see in the film that Mr. Incredible fights was specifically designed for none other than Frozone. Notice how it was able to withstand the heat of the lava and use its power against Mr. Incredible? Also notice how it had a blue light. Not a red light, a blue light. Specifically the same blue that Frozone's suit color is. So it makes you think, how did Syndrome know so much about Frozone to begin with? Well, obviously Mirage did her research. We see that in the scene where she's spying on Mr. Incredible and Frozone. She says in the dialogue, he's not alone. The fat guy's with him. Almost as if Mr. Incredible's not important on the mission. So obviously she was doing her research on Frozone. So much so that she even followed them to where they saved the civilians from the burning building. And not just that. Notice how in the burning building scene, his powers don't work because of the heat. And after that mission is completed, notice that she says at the end of the conversation, trust me, this is the one he's been looking for. Did you know that Eugene and Rapunzel both make a cameo in Frozen? During the song For the First Time in Forever, if you look very closely, you'll see Rapunzel and Flynn in the crowd. So it makes you wonder, are they somehow related? Just goes to show you how all Disney movies are connected in their own way. Did you know in Disney's Robin Hood that they actually recycled animation from other Disney films? During the song Phony King of England, you'll notice that Maid Marian's dance moves are oddly familiar. They actually recycled the footage of Snow White dancing and also Duchess from Aristocats. Did you know in Disney's The Little Mermaid, when King Triton is entering in the opening scene, you'll notice in the crowd some 3 oddly familiar Disney pals. Yep, it's none other than Disney's Mickey, Donald, and Goofy. Did you know in Avengers Endgame, during the scene where Thanos is attacking the Avenger campus, you'll notice that Ant-Man gets hit by the blast but is able to walk away unharmed. This is because if you pause it at the right scene when the blast occurs, you can see that Ant-Man shrinks down just before the impact and is unable to be hit by it. This is such a cool detail and is really quick thinking for Ant-Man. Did you know in Spider-Man No Way Home, during the scene where all 3 Spider-Men are swinging through the air, if you look very closely, you'll notice that Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man are only using the one arm, but for some reason, Tobey Maguire is using both arms. This is an indication that Tobey Maguire is the only Spider-Man that's able to do unlimited webs when the others can't. Did you know in Spider-Man Far From Home, in the beginning scene where we see Maria Hill and Nick Fury for the first time, notice how she says Nick, not Fury, Nick. This is a definite giveaway that she's in fact a Skrull, because nobody ever says the first character's name in a movie, and not to mention the post-credit scene reveals that both of these two characters are Skrulls all along. Have you heard this crazy theory about Daredevil? There's a crazy theory that suggests that one of the people that experienced the blip was none other than Daredevil. Yep, you heard that right. This actually would give a whole nother perspective on the character and would explain some key differences and why he's in the MCU. So we've seen before how the blip affected certain people, like Monica Rambeau when she was in the hospital and Yelena waking up 5 years later. This would be a very interesting take on the blip from somebody as Daredevil. Since he can't see, it would be a very interesting and unique take. The theory suggests that he could hear people's heartbeats maybe stop, and then hear like the ambulances, and then hear the confusion around him just before he vanishes. That alone gives me goosebumps because it's definitely emotional and it's a totally different take than we've seen before. It could also be a nice darker take on the blip, and I think that would just be a great storyline. It's also potentially a great storyline to kick off the new Daredevil Reborn TV show. Did you know in Disney's Mulan, when Mulan is writing down things to remember to impress the matchmaker, notice one of the qualities she lists is punctual. This is actually a reference to Aladdin where he is trying to impress Jasmine. Did you know that in Big Hero 6 that Aunt Cass's cat, Mochi, was actually dressed up as a familiar Disney character? If you look at the photo next to Hero, you'll see that Mochi's dressed up as none other than Stitch. How cute is that? Did you know in Disney's The Little Mermaid, when Ursula discovers that Ariel is too close to kissing Eric, she decides to take matters into her own tentacles. Notice that in her hand she's holding a butterfly in a bubble. This is actually a reference to her becoming Vanessa, because the word Vanessa is actually butterfly. What if I told you that Mr. Smee from Peter Pan was actually a good guy in disguise? My theory is that Mr. Smee was actually pretending to be a bad guy, but it was actually a good guy in disguise. There's a couple scenes in the movie that definitely give this away. During the scene on Skull Rock, Mr. Smee literally came close to ending Captain Hook's life, so this is definitely an indication that he was sick and tired of his evil schemes and wanted to get him out of the way. And also notice when Captain Hook literally was about moments away to stab Peter Pan, notice how he said Captain, almost as if to notify Peter what was going to happen. Also, notice at the end of the movie, he doesn't fight Wendy or any of the Lost Boys. In fact, we see him trying to escape. This is definitely an indication that he's been a good guy all along. Who knew? Did you know that Moana had 9 siblings? In the original script and storyboards of the movie, she would have had 9 older brothers. There was actually a deleted storyboard that the directors featured of her doing a sailing race against her brothers, and of course, Moana wins. There was also something in the script that said that she would actually rescue her brothers from danger. This would have been very interesting and a different take on the movie, but personally I think it's best that they had Moana just be solo. Have you heard the crazy theory about Mr. Darling from Peter Pan? There's a crazy theory that suggests that he was actually one of the first people to visit Neverland. Since in the beginning of the Peter Pan movie, it says all this has happened before and it will happen again. Not to mention, at the end of the movie, we see Mr. Darling acknowledge the Jolly Roger in the sky. He says, you know, I feel like I've seen that before a long time ago. So this goes to show you that maybe perhaps this isn't the first time that Peter Pan has encountered a family member of the Darling family. So it also adds another layer of depth to the story. So if you think about it, Peter Pan is actually a sequel to Mr. Darling's story. How crazy is that? Did you know in the movie Finding Nemo that actually the voice of Crush is none other than the director himself? This was actually a rough cut and was not intended for the movie, but test audiences loved it so much that they kept it and even did it in the movie. He actually recorded it on his couch in his office. How crazy is that? Did you know in Disney's Moana, during the song Shining, if you pay close attention to the objects around Maui, you'll recognize one that's awfully familiar. It's actually Genie's lamp from the movie Aladdin. It's such a cool detail that's often overlooked, and just goes to show you all Disney movies are connected in their own way. Did you know that there happens to be a secret hack of how to pull the sword from Sword in the Stone at Disneyland and Disney World? Yep, you heard that right. If you're a fan of the classic King Arthur tale, then you're definitely going to check this out on your next trip to Magic Kingdom. So here's how it works. If you see a cast member near the sword, you can actually ask them to help you out. They'll give you a special code word to say when you try to pull the sword from the stone. And when you say that magic word, the sword will come right out of the stone, just like in the story. And when you've successfully pulled the sword from the stone, you'll be actually given a special certificate that you can actually bring home as a souvenir. How cool is that? But keep in mind, this opportunity isn't during all day. It's actually only when a cast member is near the sword. So if you see a cast member, you might be in luck. Have you heard the crazy inside out theory? Well, during one of the scenes in the movie, we see Riley's memories contained in these orbs, and there happens to be not only the Pizza Planet truck, which is in every single Pixar movie ever, but there happens to be two that actually are scenes from another Disney Pixar film. It's actually Carl and Ellie's wedding, and it even shows the house from up. So the question is, how did Riley know them when she would have been too young to be able to know them to begin with? Well, it's possible that they could have been her grandparents and she was just watching an old film of them. How crazy is that?
Did you know in Ralph Breaks the Internet, during the scene where Ralph goes into eBay, you'll notice that he's greeted by a pop-up, and it actually says, "Sassy Housewives want to meet you." It's actually on the picture none other than Aunt Cass from Big Hero 6.
Did you know that Ursula was originally not going to be an octopus in The Little Mermaid? Just like a lot of Disney characters go through character development, Ursula was definitely no exception and in fact went through several different phases, believe it or not. Most of the character designs were inspired that of sea creatures, such as manta rays, scorpionfish, lionfish, even one that was like a snake-like appearance. Ugh, creepy. Kind of reminds me of actually Maleficent, but there was also one that showed Ursula as a mermaid, which actually is very similar to the original tale. But the big change came when the animators were actually watching a documentary on an octopus, and they were so impressed by the way that the creature's arms moved and how it had this intimidating presence that they were like, yep, this is going to be definitely Ursula. And so that's how Ursula became an octopus. So it's kind of cool seeing all these old designs of Ursula and thinking, what could it have been? Did you notice this cool detail in Disneyland's version of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge? If you look at one of the trash cans in the land, you'll notice that it actually lists the number 3263287. It may seem insignificant at first, but it actually has a lot of history to it. This is actually the same number that Luke Skywalker reads off to C-3PO in The New Hope. But believe it or not, it's actually just not a random serial number. It's actually Mark Hamill's actual phone number. You see, he wanted to have his own phone number because the directors wanted him to do a serial number randomly, and he just thought it would be more fun to do his own phone number. So whether or not this phone number works to this day is a mystery, but it's a little cool detail that is often overlooked. Did you notice this detail in the movie Tangled? During the song Mother Knows Best, you'll notice that Mother Gothel says at the end, "I love you most." And instead of kissing Rapunzel's forehead, she actually kisses her hair. Creepy, number one. And also notice throughout the entire song that she kept on staring at Rapunzel's hair and petting it. Girl, you need some help. Did you know in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, the scene where Barbossa is walking down the stairs and eats the apple at the end, this was actually not planned at all. You see, the cast and crew had no idea he was returning to the movie and was told that some other character from the first movie would return. So what you're seeing on screen is their actual reactions to him returning as a character. How cool is that? What if Andy from Toy Story actually found out that the toys were alive? This has been a burning question that we've been asking for a long time, and up until this point, it has not been resolved or answered in the movies. A YouTuber called Mark Canatero Films actually took it upon himself to do a short film of what would happen if Andy did find out that the toys were alive. And let's just say, it doesn't go according to plan at all. Andy literally finds out that Woody and the toys have been alive, and literally his entire childhood is ruined. So, most likely he will need either therapy and also to sell them at the garage sale.
Did you know in Disney's Get a Horse, there's actually a hidden character that not many people know of? Toward the end of the cartoon, you'll notice that there's a character in the corner that's actually oddly familiar. It's none other than Oswald the Lucky Rabbit himself. How cool is that? Disney has finally confirmed a longtime theory about Peter Pan and Captain Hook's backstory in a way that not many people expected. In the movie, it is revealed that Captain Hook, whose actual name is James, was the first lost boy to come to Neverland, and that he and Peter Pan were actually best friends and shared a room. And they used to play hide and seek all the time, and of course Peter Pan was the best at hiding. But not just that. The conflict that ended the friendship between James and Peter started when James wanted to visit his mother in the real world. Of course, Peter didn't want him to, and in fact, because of this, he banished James to the real world. Ouch. Sadly, James never actually found his mother and was stranded at sea. Believe it or not, he was actually rescued by none other than Mr. Smee and was taken under the care of the pirates, therefore becoming a pirate himself and later on, Captain Hook. I seriously can't believe the studio got away with this. During the same time that Princess and the Frog came out, there was literally a movie titled The Frog Prince, and looking at the two, it looks exactly identical in the poster. Not just that, the main character looks exactly like Tiana, and there are some scenes when she's talking to the frog that's very reminiscent of the scene where she's talking to Prince Naveen in the movie. So, overall, I can't believe that they actually got away with this. But there's a big difference between both scripts in the movie. You know, Princess of the Frog is completely different than The Frog Prince. The Frog Prince movie doesn't have any good storyline whatsoever. in my opinion, of course. But it's just overall kind of crazy how they came up with the same character look and poster during the same year. What do you think? What if I told you that Mother Gothel and the Evil Queen are not the same person, but are actually sisters? Looking at both characters in the movies, you'll notice that there's one difference between the two, and that is their eye color. Mother Gothel's is a grayish blue, while the Evil Queen's is a piercing green. There's too many similarities, however, to rule out the possibility that they're both connected in some way. So I believe that they're actually sisters. So we know in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs how the Evil Queen is jealous of anyone who's deemed the fairest of them all. But what if Mother Gothel at one time was actually given this title, the fairest of them all? With her over-the-top personality, beauty, and not to mention her theatrical flair, she would have definitely attracted the attention of not only suitors, but had been the pride and joy of both their parents. And the Evil Queen was definitely not happy with this, so much so that she would use the same concoction to turn herself into a hag on first her own sister, thereby eliminating her beauty. Talk about cray-cray. Did you know that The Lion King is actually a ripoff of another movie? The Lion King previously copied a movie called Kimba the White Lion, and in this movie, it completely shows side-by-side comparisons of each film. Kimba actually came out first, and oddly enough, his name literally sounds like Simba. In one of the early sketches, they literally were going to have Simba be a white lion. Oddly enough, they even feature the same baboons like Rafiki, the same scenes from the movie. It's just shocking how Disney actually got away with this. But what do you think? This movie completely ripped off The Little Mermaid. There was literally a Little Mermaid that came out in 1992, and looking at both of them, they're practically identical. Not to mention the prince in the movie looks exactly like Prince Eric, and there happens to be some scenes that are reminiscent of The Little Mermaid. What do you think? Have you ever wondered how Mother Gothel managed to stay alive for so long? Well, what if I told you that she actually had some help from another Disney villain? My theory is that Mother Gothel enlisted the help of none other than Maleficent. Maleficent is known for placing people under a deep sleep, but did you know in the original Charles Perrault story, Sleeping Beauty was actually under a deep sleep for not just one day, but for 100 years. And in that 100 years, Sleeping Beauty did not age at all. So it's not hard to assume that Mother Gothel would have been placed under a deep sleep for 100 years as well, and therefore didn't age. It would also explain why there is the spinning wheel in Rapunzel's tower that's shown a couple times in the film. Not to mention there's also the Sleeping Beauty book that's featured in the library with Rapunzel and Eugene. How crazy is that? Did you know that St. Mary Magdalene is actually in The Little Mermaid? During the song Part of Your World, when Ariel expresses her love of the human world and wants to know what's a fire, she stares at a painting. Notice that this painting is not just a girl. It's actually a very famous painting by George de la Tour of none other than St. Mary Magdalene. How cool is that? There's actually the reason behind this. The animator that animated Ariel, Glenn Keane, is not only a devout Catholic, he wanted it also to incorporate some of the lyrics in the song since it shows Mary Magdalene, looking at a flame. How cool is that? Did you know this cool fun fact in Captain America Winter Soldier? When Sam meets Captain America for the first time, he recommends a soundtrack from 1972. Notice that when Captain America is writing stuff on the notepad, how it lists a bunch of different stuff, like I Love Lucy or whatever. But notice this, in different countries, they actually have different things on the list. It's just a really cool fun fact that not many people know of. Did you know in Monsters University, during the scene where Sully goes into Mike's dorm, you'll notice that on Randall's side of the room that there's actually a poster on his wall that says The Winds of Change. The reason why this is very interesting is because in Monsters Inc., Randall says, you hear that? It's the winds of change, as a callback to his poster in Monsters University. It's a really cool detail that links both movies together. Did you notice a small detail in Spider-Man No Way Home? During the scene on the bridge, we notice that Peter Parker has a cool nanotech device that he's able to use to be able to take on and off his suit with ease. But notice this, the CGI team literally took every single detail in the movie so seriously that they even had the shadows match in the scene. Like for instance, the scene where he's actually changing from his suit to his regular clothes. Notice that even the nanotech follows him on the car. It's just a really cool detail that is often overlooked and just goes to show you that even Marvel pays attention to the smallest details. Did you notice a small detail in Spider-Man No Way Home? During the scene on the bridge, we notice that Peter Parker has a cool nanotech device that he's able to use to be able to take on and off his suit with ease. But notice this, the CGI team literally took every single detail in the movie so seriously that they even had the shadows match in the scene. Like for instance, the scene where he's actually changing from his suit to his regular clothes. Notice that even the nanotech follows him on the car. Did you know in Meet the Robinsons that the school that Wilbur attends, Joyce Williams, is actually very significant? If you flip the names Williams-Joyce, it's actually the writer of the Meet the Robinsons books. How cool is that? Did you know in the movie Cars 2, during one of the scenes in the movie, it actually shows an insurance company called Insure Care. Believe it or not, that's the same company that Bob worked for in Incredibles. How cool is that?
Did you notice a surprising cameo in the movie Ratatouille? There's actually a crazy cameo that not many people know of. During the scene where Remy is running through Paris for the first time, he actually runs through an apartment. And in this apartment, there's a shadow of a character that looks awfully familiar. It's actually none other than Doug from Up. How crazy is that? So if you think about it, all Pixar movies are connected in their own way.